Hey, this is Carl, and today I wanted to talk about a topic that I get asked about on occasion in private lessons, and that is the topic of how do I create a an effective practice schedule. What I've noticed is that while there are a lot of really specific things I can talk about with any particular private student, there's sort of a framework that I always end up suggesting that I think can help pretty much anybody. And I have throughout the last 30 years or so adapted this little framework for myself over and over again. And there's been a lot of different little manipulations of it. It's very effective if you just take a few principles and sort of stick to them and then work around that and create various practice schedules that apply to your specific needs. So I think anybody who's trying to improve their musical abilities in various areas could get something out of some of these principles. So I'm just going to kind of go through each one and I'll kind of just try to compartmentalize the video so that you hopefully will remember sort of the basic categories that I'm talking about here. So let's get started with that. Okay, so the first thing I want to recommend in this video is that you write things down. It's a huge thing. When we write things down, it seems to take our thoughts to a whole different level in terms of awareness. It also forces us, or at least encourages us, to think things through a little bit more and structure the thoughts. So when we write things down, then we can at that point start to create goals or set goals and then create a hopefully an effective path to get from where we are to realizing any particular goal. Okay, so some different things I would suggest in terms of writing things down. First of all, it's not a bad idea to just journal your thoughts about what you're trying to achieve musically, and then journal. In your journal, you can write down those general thoughts, and that could kind of be your overall goal, maybe. And then work backwards from there in terms of what are the components that get me from where I am to realizing that goal. Now, those things could be the areas of maybe musicality, and then that could be broken down into maybe the intellectual side, like understanding harmony and theory. Maybe I need to work on my my music theory knowledge. And then and then after that, or maybe in another category would be maybe the more abstract or the things that have to do with creative and learning vocabulary or creating new vocabulary, studying other people's vocabularies, and then how do I manipulate that into my own language. It could be anything like that, but just taking hopefully a thoughtful approach, and then writing these things down in your journal. Write down now. Also, maybe it's a little easier when you're thinking in terms of technical practice, because there's a lot more tried and true methods of, if I practice this scale or sequence at a certain beat per minute, and then I go to the next, and that'll be logical to just go up faster and all that kind of stuff. Now, those things are fairly easy to keep to understand the process, but just like I was saying about the creative part of it and maybe the theory and harmony part, you still need to write it down, because keeping track of where you want to go and where you are as related to where you are now, and understanding the gap that's in between, the clearer you can be about that, the better. It's always a matter of identifying my goal and then working back from there to, seeing that gap between what that goal would be and where I am now, and how do I get there. Now, the cool thing about journaling, in addition to just the idea of defining those things, is that we want to revisit that journal at a later date, hopefully not too much later, and then see what we thought about, what we're thinking about, how that progress has been made. So I actually have a little bit of an old journal right here. just a notebook. And I wrote down, it was my organization of practice time for April 24th, 2009, a Friday. So I put down my primary focus was on, at that particular time, was on improving alternate picking skill. So I have little categories. I said, okay, I'm working on the Kreutzer violin etude number 2, or Caprice number 2, from the book of 42 etudes by Rudolf Kreutzer. It was violin music. Using a clean tone, working on, I wrote down that I wanted to work on picking closer to the neck pickup for an improved tone. I wrote down that I had recently backed the metronome tempo down from 92 to between 92 and 100 beats per minute, which was slower. I think 120 was where I was trying to practice before that. Consider slight refingering of the transition of sequences at bottom of page 1. So I had some kind of specific things. I had a little goal here about improving the tone and cleanliness of the performance and so forth. And I go on to talk about some other things here, but then, but I want to go to the next page, which was a few days later, and I say, okay, I reconsidered the fingering, or refingering the Kreutzer number 2, and then I had decided, well, I'm just going to clean up the original fingering that I had, because I gave it a day to work on that new fingering. It just wasn't working out. And then, but then I say, okay, it seems to be progressing at the tempo, and now I'm working up to 108, but I still feel I'm too messy at 120 beats per minute. And then I go on to talk about other things, like the fact that I was trying to use a thinner pick, but get that to sound better, because that's sort of a challenge with a thin pick on an electric guitar with a clean tone, as it can sound thin. But anyway, I wanted to work that out because I felt like it was a good trade-off for better tone with a distortion. But that's besides the point. I'm just kind of giving you an idea about some of the stuff I wrote in the journal at that particular time. It could be any topic that you're working on, but that's an example. Now, another thing that can really help is to use a dry erase board. Okay, so you can see that it is a kind of a small dry erase board, and it will, since it'll fit in the frame next to me there. That I bought that originally just to have for practice, and I've used it for lots of different things in my music room over the years. But my first use of it for a long time, when I was single, I actually would just put that on the wall in front of me, so when I woke up, the first thing I saw was the dry erase board with my daily practice schedule mapped out completely. I had a 3-hour routine on that board, and it was all broken down into specifically how many minutes and what metronome markings were going with each thing that I was going to practice that day. It was that whole routine was a technical practice. There was no theory or sight reading or ear training or anything like that worked into it. It was just strictly a 3-hour physical practice, technical routine. And so I would see that every day. I put it where I would have to see it, and then eventually, when I didn't want it in front of me there, I moved it to different places, but always where I would see it and have to acknowledge that it was there. Now, which actually brings me to another point, is that you need to identify how much time you have and divide it up in a way that makes sense. Okay, so but writing things down and being real honest with yourself about where you can start with the tempo and how long you should practice this thing. Some of these things are going to be about you knowing yourself and how much you can really focus, how long you can focus. Usually when you start something new, the excitement means you can focus on it for a good while, but your mind may be kind of resistant to taking the new information in. So just kind of be aware of what point it is that the information seems to not be improving, or your familiarity. Maybe you need to take a break. You can still maybe practice it a lot over the course of a day, but you might have to break things up that are new. But anyway, now the next thing I would say is I really want to actually go into the idea of how much time do you have and how consistently can you practice. For me, the first thing that I encountered, like in the way of a structured practice routine, was when I applied to music school, Musicians Institute, back in the 80s. They sent me a little booklet that had basically a 3 hour practice routine or close to it, and sort of broken up into some categories. And I didn't really do things that way before that. I would just focus on one thing and practice the crap out of that one thing and kind of ignore everything else. Now that actually works great when you can afford to spend that kind of time and sort of not think about the other areas. But if you're trying to improve in several areas, then you're going to have to uh, basically itemize your practice schedule in a way that you can be effective in many areas at once. Now, especially if you're studying at a music school where you've got a lot of topics to cover, then you may have to section off a certain amount of the time for each thing. And some of those things are going to be about you knowing what you need. If you already are a good sight reader, then obviously that's not going to have to take up as much time. Um, if you're let's say that you're not very good or you've never tried to work on your ear training, well then that may have to take up some of the time, and then maybe not so much on some other area. Um, Over the years, though, like the schedule that I just sort of went over about the technical practice, a strictly technical practice, that was during a time when I was just focused on the techniques and not really worrying about studying any new harmony theory, that kind of stuff. Now, at times, those were the primary areas, and I didn't really study the techniques so much, and I just kept a minimal maintenance schedule basically going with the technique. So these are things you'll have to judge for yourself, and all this comes back to establishing goals and then being really consistent about addressing those goals. Now, going back to the journal, when you've established goals like that, it's always a good idea to write your goals down as if they're with sort of two ways of thinking in at the same time. In one way, you're thinking this goal is set in stone. It's so important that I'm committed to going towards this goal. But at the same time, there's a certain part of your mind that has to go, okay, that's my intention, but if it's not working out and I find a better path, something that works better for me, or something that appeals to me, that pulls me in a slightly different direction, I can always adjust the goal as needed. But you have to give things a chance before you'll know if they're working. So that's why we want to write things down from the general all the way to super specific in the journal, and then we want to revisit that journal at a later date and see how we feel about what we've been trying to do, and assess how effective it's been, and assess if there are any changes that need to be made. These things are really helpful, so I highly encourage you to do that. Now, if you need to find resources for certain things, there's millions of things out there, tons of videos everywhere, free information everywhere, things you can buy, whatever, that tell you how to improve your technique, or books that have scales and arpeggios and or textbooks with lots of great theory information. I could recommend probably a mountain of any of those kinds of things to you. And if you have if anybody watching this has any questions about anything like that, feel free to leave them in the comments under the video, and I'll try to get back to you with any recommendations about that. Now, one last thing about the timing, or how much time you have to put into your practice every day. Be honest with yourself about how much you can do and how consistently you can do it. Now, I'll give an example about in the 90s when I was really pursuing classical guitar really heavily. I had a 3 hour memorized classical guitar routine that I had to maintain so I could go out and play at wine and cheese tasting parties or weddings or whatever. And that's a lot of work just to maintain that, to keep that up. So it took me a certain amount of time just to do that. So what I did is I broke it up into 3 1-hour sets, and I would play through each one on a 3-day rotation basis. And each day I would not only play through that set, but I would spend some time working on any difficulties I encountered. And then that kind of left me some more time each day to practice other things. So now, if you've got 3 hours you can practice, then maybe you can spend, divide it up into the sections of, well, I've got an academic section I want to practice, I've got a technical section I want to practice, and a creative section. If you're doing a multi-pronged approach like that, always put the most creative stuff near the end, because that needs to have the softest end time. You want to be creative and not be worried about, oh, well, I've got other things I've got to try to cram in here. If you put the creative at the first of the practice schedule, that tends to be fun, and you're not going to get to the rest of it. So same for academic. Put the academic stuff first, because if you put it near the end, you'll never do it. Now, it's not fun for most of us, maybe some people, but most of us don't really enjoy that as much. So if you, like, I always put, back in the day, I always put ear training and sight reading early, and I put scales and technical practice in the middle, and then creative stuff, playing songs and learning songs and writing songs and recording. Those things all went at the end of the practice schedule. Now, sometimes these practice schedules might be 8 hours long, or longer even, but however much time it could be, maybe you've only got 45 minutes to practice every day. If that's the case, then divide that up accordingly. But just be real thoughtful about things, plan things out, and write things down, and I guarantee you you'll have a lot more success than you will flying by the seat of your pants with your practice. Okay, so I hope these tips have been helpful, and if you have anything you'd like to suggest about this, please do so in the comments. If you like this video, hit like and subscribe, and I'm going to try to keep them coming, so I hope to see you soon. Thanks.